Now we'll go to our first question. We'll start with a question submitted at the beginning of the debate on a card. And again, a reminder to all, you can write questions on cards and submit them. Just make sure you put your name and the town you're from on there. And also raise your hand if you wish to ask a question from the floor. But this first question comes from Helen Shaw of Rockport. And we'll start with Chris, and we'll work Chris, Carol, Joan, Ed in that order. How many bills have you sponsored? How many bills have you co-sponsored? Of those, which one are you most proud of? And for Carol, which bills might you put forward, and what types of bills would you co-sponsor? Chris.
Boy, I've got to be honest with you and tell you, I don't have any idea how many bills I have either sponsored or co-sponsored in the 10 years that I've served in the legislature. But I can tell you that the bills that I've focused on have been on related to things like the seed capital tax credit, the Maine downtown center development, protecting and preserving our downtowns, regulatory reform. We did. I offered an opportunity for an ombudsman to serve as the spokesperson, as the director of activities for the businesses as they grow and develop, trying to navigate the system in Department of Economic and Community Development. I mean, the list is long. I'm trying to think of those. The one that I'm most proud of, I think the one I'm most proud of probably is the Historic Preservation Tax Credit, because it helped both to preserve our downtowns and to provide an incentive for construction at a time that the economy was otherwise quite weak. And I think it also preserved what is the very essence of Maine, and that is the historic nature of our downtowns and the utilization of buildings that already exist. So that might be my proudest achievement. I'll probably think of another as soon as the microphone passes to someone else. But it seems to me that might be my proudest achievement.
Great, thanks. Carol.
My question is, what might I submit?
Would you submit and
Okay, I will give it a shot. Recently, I had a conversation with a local boat builder, and he shared an eye-opening story with me. And his story is that his clients are international or from out of state mostly, and they choose to have their boats built here in Rockport because of the quality of the workmanship. So they contract, they have their boats built here, and they are beautiful works of art, and they like to keep their boats here in the summer so that this boat builder can show them off. It's a great economic boom. But the state of Maine has a tax on these owners of the boats that if the boat stays in Maine longer than 30 days, they were originally charged 5% of the value of the boat. Now, this boat builder has been paying taxes all along on the workmanship, the materials, et cetera. So this is an additional tax just because your boat has been here more than 30 days. The Marine Trade Industries was able to lower that to 2.5%. But why this is significant is that we need to remember that Maine is in competition with the rest of the country. And when you are competing with boat builders in Newport, Rhode Island, who are not subjected to this kind of tax, then that makes it easier or more difficult, depending on your viewpoint, where you're going to have your boat built. So will I introduce a bill to reduce that tax? I don't know. But it's certainly important enough that I will take a look at it. Thank you.
thank you. Joan.
Well, I learned when I went to the legislature that we have maybe more than 1,700 bills every session. It's a lot of bills. And I remember when I was at Outward Bound, every time if we had something bad happen, we would say, oh, we need to make a rule that we can't do that anymore. And I thought, wait a minute. You can codify everything, and you can take away all the adventure there is in Outward Bound. And I think there's something to be said for over-regulating at the state level. I take a view that we have too many bills and that less is more. So unless something is really compelling to me, I'm careful not to submit a bill. I have submitted bills that have been primarily asked by constituents to bring forth, similar perhaps to what Carol's talking about. I couldn't really give you exactly a number, but it's probably less than 10 over the 4 years. And they have been primarily because of constituent requests that I thought were worthy. One was about psychotropic drugs for foster care children that Patricia McLean was very concerned about, that was of true concern, and we're doing a study group about that. Another was helping Aqua Maine, now Maine Water, with an issue that they had about collecting bills and trying to help them. Another was, Tom Murphy does a lot of work on industrial hemp. And I, in my first term, submitted a bill allowing Maine farmers to grow hemp, which we did in the 1800s. But of course, that can't go into effect until the federal government allows hemp or,
10 seconds.
yeah. In terms of co-sponsoring, there are more than I could count, probably 2. But I think that's my attitude about bills, and I'm very careful about how I pick and choose the ones I sponsor.
Thank you. Basically, there are 2 bills that I'm very proud of. As far as co-sponsoring bills, there's been a great number of them that I've signed on to. Many of them dealt with the driving laws that govern our state. I've also worked very hard in trying to strengthen our rail development in the state of Maine. One of the things that we need is to take some of the pressure off our roads and bridges, and I've worked very closely with the railroads in trying to establish some guiding principles on what they need and how we can possibly get the railroads to take a more active role in not only freight passage, but also passenger passage. But the 2 I'm very proud of is I sponsored one where servicemen who are on active service and they're stationed in Maine, and if they buy a home or they're living off the base, they are exempt from property taxes. I felt very good on that one. And the other one dealt with the windjammers that we're all very familiar with, that I was able to get a no sales tax on purchases they make for their equipment. So those basically are the 2 that I feel helped out the most. But I did sign on to many others, and so those are the 2 I really feel, though, that we're good. Thank you.
We have a question from the floor. I see Dave Jackson's hand raised. Dave, your question, where you're from, and your name and form.
Rockport. I'd like to ask all of the contestants here tonight this question. When the legislature reconvenes in January, you're going to be faced with a $100 million plus deficit in the current budget. And soon after that, you're going to have to create a new biennial budget. That's a pretty daunting task. How can each of you contribute to the solution of that problem? Where is the money going to come from? Where do the cuts have to go? Thank you.
And we start with Carol.
Well, this is a very complicated situation, and it's not something that I don't think anybody in the legislature takes lightly. I feel like there needs to be a multi-layered approach to closing this gap, looking in every way possible to reduce spending, asking our departments to be as lean as possible. This is a concept that I hear over and over on my work on the FMC Advisory Committee, where they are a lean operating business. So encouraging our departments to do that. In addition, though, we need to increase revenue. And I think the best way to increase revenue is get people working. And it needs to be immediate, and there needs to be quick pathways to workforce development, whether it's an apprentice program, some sort of partnership with private industries. But you get people going back to work. They are contributing to the tax stream. They're purchasing. The sales tax is their purchases contributes to the sales tax revenue stream for us. And then in addition, I would ask that the state agencies look at in their request for proposals, their contracting services, that they are required to hire Maine companies. You may not know this, but there are many of our state departments that contract with companies out of state. That doesn't seem right to me. When we need Maine companies working hard and employing people, we need to be hiring them from the state level. So, and lastly, we need to look at privatizing services. And I'm not saying the major services, but I am personally familiar with privatization of services within DHHS that works. And I look forward, maybe later in another question, of really explaining how that works. And the services are actually much better and more cost-efficient with the state of Maine. Thank you.
Joan?
Well, this seems to be a recurring problem every year, and it certainly with our economy is not really getting better. I am very concerned about the reduction in income taxes and what that does to our budget before we do some overall comprehensive tax reform. I'm all for reducing the income tax. In fact, voted for the bill 1333 that brought us from 8.5% down to 6.5% income tax, but it did broaden the sales tax so that we weren't cutting monies out from underneath the support system that I believe we need in the state. So I think we need to really look at our overall sense of revenues. Yes, I think we want to grow the jobs, we want to increase revenues in the state. I did hear the report this evening that our revenues from sales taxes are looking a little bit better than what I'd heard a few weeks ago, so that's good news. But the fact is that when we start cutting services, especially if we start cutting aid to education, if we start cutting our funds going to municipalities, that just pushes the cost down to the property taxes and the property owners. So I don't think that's the answer. But I do think we need to look at our revenues. We need to look at how we can definitely be increasing business, but also where are we cutting our revenues in the state. Then we also need to look at MaineCare reform. I think cutting people off of MaineCare is not the way to save money there. Rather, I think we need to do a comprehensive review. Did you know that we have recovered over $7 million in 2010 from fraud that was from pharmaceutical companies rather than from individuals?
Thank you, Dan. That's a challenging question. It's been a question, it's been a problem. By Constitution, as you know, Maine must have a balanced budget. So at the end of each session, the sessions are rather long. Sometimes they go through the night, and there's a lot of give and take to try to reach that goal of getting a balanced budget. One of the things over the years has been to try to trim the departments. I know in DOT, for example, over the past 8 years, they've reduced their workforce by over by 25% or more. The requirements that we use on our roads, we used to have a requirement of, I think it was almost 3/4 of an inch of blacktop. Well, over the years, because of the cost and reducing the cost, it's down to less than 3/8 of an inch. So the longevity of those roads doesn't last nearly as long. So we kind of are short-sighting ourselves in one way by reducing the amount of blacktop. Yes, it reduces the cost, but also reduces the life of a road. And roads are very, very important in Maine because that's what we use to connect the various parts of Maine. We must broaden the sales tax. We have a very narrow base. A couple of years ago, there was a move to reduce the income tax and broaden the sales tax. Now, we all pay an income tax, but the sales tax is a choice tax. And we've broadened it, we would have made up, and we would have been able to reduce the income tax by quite a bit. However, you have a choice whether you want to buy something or you don't. And if you choose not to, you're not going to pay that sales tax. But right now, we don't have anything. Okay?
for those who haven't noticed, government is much better at growing and staying the course than it is at examining itself, determining what's working and what isn't, and eliminating those programs that don't work. There is sort of a self-perpetuation in government at all levels, I think, and especially at the state level, that causes programs to be developed, to exist, and then to maintain and persevere whether they are still being effective or not. In the last 2 years, we have begun the process of examining what's working and what isn't in state government. The governor, in his most recent efforts to prepare the next biennial budget, which will be presented to the legislature in January, is working on a zero-based budget approach. Every program within every department is being looked at for its efficacy, whether it's working, whether it isn't, whether the need that created the program in the first place still exists. Because in many cases, we're an evolving state with an evolving economy, and the needs may not be there as they used to be. So that examination, I think, is critical to get to the balanced budget. As both Joan and Ed alluded to, we faced budget deficits every year of the 10 years that I have entered the legislature. Structural gaps, budget deficits, we are not moving in the direction we need to, and clearly, growing the economy is the answer. If we don't have a growing economy, we will continue to have what we are suffering from right now, which is a smaller state budget based on our ability to raise revenue because the economy is not as strong as it must be. So growing the economy is the essential answer, I think, to addressing the issue, but also understanding that the programs we're operating are operating as they should be, as effectively as possible, and that they are the programs that we need that meet the needs of Maine families and Maine businesses.